This program is brought to you by 3C TV. Like what you learned? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up on the latest 3C TV programs.
I would like to introduce Erica Endra Jonas, who is the president of the California Community Colleges Chief Student Services Administrators Association.
Hello. We're an unusual organization because that's our name, but we're the CSSOs throughout the state. Welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see everybody here, our student services folks, our instructional folks, a lot of academic senate presidents and folks out there. This is great. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just welcome everyone and also introduce my fabulous CSSO presidential dream team up here. I have the immediate past president, Dennis from Cabrillo. Bailey Fournier, sorry about that. And then behind me I have the president-elect, Ron Traverneck from Ohlone College, and yay Ron, and he has a special presentation to make.
So Dennis used the analogy or the phrase, I think, called bread and roses. I had never heard of that expression. But since we've had the bread, we wanted to offer Linda the roses as a thank you for all your hard work. Thanks, Linda.
What a nice surprise. Thank you, guys. And when Erica said the dream team, she's not kidding. Dennis was at the table every step of the way as we did a lot of the hard work for the last year on the Student Success Initiative. Erica has picked up the baton without skipping a beat, and I think today is partially the result of that. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Okay, a couple of announcements that I was supposed to make earlier, and now I'm only remembering one of them. One announcement that I want to make is before the end of this presentation, you will hear from Melissa Connor about a new messaging project that we're working on with the Foundation for California Community Colleges, funded by the Kresge Foundation, to help students understand the changing atmosphere in community colleges and to help them understand what they need to do to be successful, and in particular about priority enrollment. So they're staffing a table in order to walk you through the website that's being created, and I really strongly encourage you to stop by, look at the materials, and fill out a survey that they have, because you're kind of our focus group to help us be on track to get the messaging right. And Debbie, was there something else I was supposed to say?
Just a reminder about the cards, the questions.
Okay, yeah, so a reminder that you have the index cards to write questions, and so that kind of is my lead-in into what we're doing here right now. This presentation is called Nuts and Bolts, and I'll tell you right from the start, this is going to be too much detail for some of you, and it's going to be not nearly enough detail for some of you. So for those of you in the latter category, actually you're in luck, because immediately following this general session, during the first set of breakouts, Debbie Sheldon and I are going to do a Q&A, nuts and bolts session to follow up on this and to dig into even more of the detail. So you're in good shape. For those who think this is way too much detail, try not to walk out. I mean, if you have to, I'll know I'm digging deeper into the weeds than I should. But we wanted everyone to start from kind of a common understanding of what this is that we're talking about, what this new program is, and what some of the challenges and the opportunities are. So if I see you glazing over, I'll try to move on to the next topic. But we're going to talk about the where this all came from very quickly. We're going to do an overview of the Title V regulations for the Student Success and Support Program, which many of you probably saw my email. Those were signed off by the Department of Finance, thank you very much, and have been filed with the Secretary of State. So they will be effective on October 17th, I think, is what I said. Is that what I said? And so that's great. We're moving forward. I'll talk very briefly about the reporting requirements for the program. I'll talk a very little bit about the MIS data elements, but there will also be a session presented by Myrna Huffman that will go into detail on the data elements a little later. And I think I might even tell you that when I get to that slide. And then we'll talk a little bit about the funding formula for the future and the current one and the allocations that we actually have to give to you, to those of you who care about things like that. And then I'll be done, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Debbie's going to talk a little bit about student equity planning and where we are with that. And then Bonnie Edwards from our Telecommunications and Technology Unit is going to talk about the big technology projects that we're currently launching. And then, as I said, Melissa Connor is going to talk about the Priority Enrollment Awareness Campaign. Whoops. Okay. So, where did this come from? Well, most of you know the answer to that. We spent a year, basically, led by Chancellor at the time, Jack Scott, thanks in part to legislation, SB 1163 by Senator Carol Liu, that told us that it was time to focus on student success. And whereas there were many people talking about student success in kind of a simplistic way, the Board of Governors and the Chancellor went to the Senator Scott and others, Senator Liu and others, and said, listen, we can do this. We will put together a task force to be thoughtful about student success in our system. We'll buckle down to work, and so the legislation directed us to do just that. There was a task force that met for almost a full year. Amy Supinger is here with us today, who was the director of that task force. And we dug into a lot of the research, some of the national research that Dr. O'Banion referred to earlier, and looked at what's going on in the community college system currently, and came up with recommendations for how to improve. And excuse me. And those recommendations span every aspect of what our institutions do, but quite a few of them are in the arena of student services, and that was a relatively easy place to start. We introduced legislation, SB 1456, carried by then Senator Alan Lowenthal, now Congressman Alan Lowenthal, to take on several of the recommendations. First, the requirement, that's the recommendation from the task force, that we require students to go through orientation, assessment, and develop education plans from the beginning of their career in community college. Terry O'Banion talked about that this morning, that students need to have a direction, and they need to be supported to do the things that need to be done in order to achieve that direction. So another specific recommendation of the Student Success Task Force was that students be required to declare a course of study early in their career. And so that was addressed in SB 1456. That bill also talked about the conditions for receipt of the BOG fee waiver. And in the task force discussions, that recommendation, as well as requirements for students to get or retain priority enrollment, were part of an approach to incentivizing students to do the things that we know work. You know, when you're telling a student that they can fail and fail and fail and yet enroll at no cost, that's sending a very mixed message if we're telling students that we want them to accomplish a goal and be successful. So the enrollment priorities piece of all this moved more quickly and were in regulations that the board adopted a year ago because it did not require legislation. But the other pieces were in the bill. And then finally, the Student Success Task Force said we should put our money where our priorities are, and that it was important to invest in the Student Success Initiative. And in fact, the legislature and the governor have done that with a first installment in this budget, and we hope that will grow in coming years. In addition, in SB 1456, that was where we impose certain requirements for the colleges as a condition of receiving your Student Success and Support Program funding. So the accountability scorecard that I'm sure you've all seen and you are all displaying prominently on your web pages, you're actually required to do that. And once we have developed a common assessment test, which Bonnie will talk about later. If you are using an assessment test, you'll be required to use the common assessment test. We spent the next year planning how we would implement all of this. We convened several work groups last year, one specifically to revise the Title V regulations that were just adopted, another one to look at the MIS data elements for matriculation and to revise them in conjunction with recommending a funding formula for the new Student Success and Support Program, and I'll talk more about that. This current year, we're looking at as a planning year for you in the colleges to work on making the changes in your reporting system so that you can get your MIS data in accurately, for you to work on processes on your campuses to implement this program. And during this year at the state level, it'll be time for us to pick up some of the pieces that we weren't able to include the first year, and a big chunk of that is working on rules for non-credit programs, including a funding formula for non-credit Student Success and Support Program. And it actually will dovetail nicely with the broader effort that's going on this year between the community colleges and the State Department of Education to look at the provision of adult ed and basic skills education in the state of California. So those conversations will coincide. Next year, you will begin to operate under the new program in the sense that we will ask you for a program plan and a budget plan that reflects the new program. And you will have another year to catch up on your data, because for that data that you provide in 2014-15 will be used to calculate your allocations for 2015-16. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when I don't need to go into detail right now because I'm going to get to that. So what has changed between the old matriculation program and the Student Success and Support Program? Beyond the name, the old program had 8 funded components. And we know, those of us who've been in the system for a long time, know that the program was never funded to accomplish everything that it was designed to accomplish. So an important piece of what we were doing in the Student Success Program was to make sure that we were focusing the resources that we could get to those areas of the campus and those functions that were most important in promoting student success. Under the old law, colleges were required to provide students with orientation, assessment, and education planning, along with counseling and advising. But there was no clear requirement that students undergo or take advantage of those services. So in SB 1456, it does make that very clear. In the past, we looked at the matriculation plan as a standalone document and a standalone process, and now we see it as a critical piece of meeting broader institutional goals for student equity and student and institutional success. Under the old program, funding was allocated strictly based on your enrollments. In SB 1456, it requires us to take into consideration services provided to students as part of the allocation formula. So we've done that. And then finally, kind of as a product of that funding approach, although you've always been required to report MIS data on services, you've never really done it, most of you. And so we've never had very good data. We've had it from selected institutions, and there's been research done on those colleges, but we've never had good data across the state, and now we will have that because it will be used for funding. So, the premise of SB 1456. This is a quote from our summary of it in Title V, but it says, "Student success is the responsibility of the institution and student, supported by well-coordinated and evidence-based student and instructional services to foster academic success." I think that says it all. It's the college is required to provide services. The students are required to take advantage of them and to focus on a goal and attempt to achieve that goal. And it's clear that this is not something that can be done by student services alone. This is an institutional responsibility, and that's why it's so exciting that all of you are here. I don't need to tell you that because you obviously understand that, or you wouldn't have come. Okay, so now we talk about the core services. I've heard a lot of people start to refer to it as the core 3, although it's really kind of 4. But the core 3, it starts with orientation. And, you know, there are multiple ways that these services can be delivered. And what you will find in the regulations and in the funding formula is that we are telling you what is required that the institution provide to the student. What we do not tell you is how to do it or who should do it. Those are institutional decisions that are going to vary from place to place depending on a lot of factors that we did not think that the state could control. So orientation, it's a way to get students ready to be successful on the campus, to know about the college programs and services that are available to them, know how to find their way around campus if they're on-ground students, what are the academic expectations that they have to meet, what are your institutional procedures, how do they access information about institutional procedures and other things, how do they get off on solid footing. Obviously, you would want to tell them about specific policies that are important to their success. You'd want to tell them about fees and you know, what do they have to do to maintain priority enrollment and maintain their BOG fee waiver eligibility. These are all essential pieces of information for students to have if we want them to stay enrolled and be successful. Assessment for placement is the second of the core 3. And this is the definition that's in SB 1456. And you'll notice that this is a very broad definition. It's not only a test, and it's not necessarily a test at all. Assessment can be accomplished in any way that you can demonstrate is effective in getting students into the curriculum at the level where they are likely to be successful and be able to move on their academic pathway. So if you're using a test, then you cannot use a test alone. You must use a test plus another measure, and we've always referred to that as multiple measures. But in the regulations, you'll see the concept of other measures or alternate measures where you may use a transcript evaluation or other things that are effective in getting students where they need to be. And then the third core 3 is counseling, advising, and other education planning services. I'm going to focus on the education planning part of it because that's what's really new in the new program. But in the regulations, it defines an abbreviated education plan, which is 1 to 2 semesters in length, and you would use that anytime it's not appropriate to do a full education plan. So it might be because it's a new student and you don't have time to do a full education plan in order for them to get priority enrollment. It might be because they have no idea what they're doing and they need a semester or 2 of exploration before you can do a full education plan. It may be that they have a 1 semester goal, in which case there's no point trying to do a full education plan. So the abbreviated education plan is an option. And then there's an understanding that when a student declares their course of study, then they need a comprehensive education plan. And in the regulations, we will require students to declare a course of study by the time they have completed 15 semester units or prior to completing their 3rd semester of enrollment. That's going to be a big change for students and for colleges. But if we don't help students define their pathway, then they're not likely to stay on it. And that's something else that Terry O'Banion talked about, that even for students who don't really know, then they need to be on a pathway that gives them some directed exploration so that they can figure it out. And so that's, we'll be working on that. And if students do not want to do that, it's possible for the institution, you would have the authority to withhold transcripts and services to require them to do it. And that's, I don't know that any institutions, there may be some institutions that have actually begun to try that, but that's the level of authority that colleges will now have to require students to do it. So the 4th of the core 3 is really follow-up. I mean, the core 3 is for entering students, for new students, to get them off on the right foot. But obviously, you can't abandon students at that point. So the law focuses on follow-up for at-risk students, and that's defined as students who are enrolled in basic skills, who have not identified an education goal and course of study, and those who are on academic or progress probation, which means that they are also at risk of losing their priority enrollment and losing their BOG fee waiver. So for these students, follow-up is funded at a greater weight in the funding formula, but there are also provisions to provide follow-up services for other students who may need help staying on track. So that's just a very high-level overview of the new regulations. The reporting requirements are really pretty similar to what's always been required for the matriculation program, although the reports themselves are going to look pretty different, I think. The Student Success and Support Program Plan includes a budget plan as one element. I don't know that what the plan looks like in its gross outlines is that different, but the intent is that you tell us how you will provide services, how you will allocate program resources and your own institutional resources to accomplish the goals, how you will fulfill the Title V requirements, and how you will integrate the Student Success and Support Program with your other college planning efforts. And so that will be, we'll ask you for the first one next year, and then we will ultimately require it every 3 to 5 years, a refreshment, but you know, have you just give us an annual update to the extent that there are changes. And we'll be, we had intended to convene a work group to actually look at the reporting requirements and forms going forward, and we ran out of, kind of ran out of time and just got some things out for you in draft form that we'll share at the next workshop, and then we'll be finalizing those as we move forward. So that's, I don't have time to talk about that. There's just the outlines of the plan. This whole presentation will be, we'll post it online, so if you want to read those details, you can. So MIS data collection is going to improve, folks. And I'm not sure, you know, it's going to take some time before colleges put in place the systems to collect the data with accuracy on an ongoing basis, so that it's not a burden. But we're gonna count those services in your funding formula, and so it's got to be right. And we, like I said, we worked with a work group to develop it, and I think we've done a good job. So the student success data file we looked at the old matriculation elements and started to revise them, and then drew the conclusion that we should actually create a new data file rather than make the revisions that were as extensive as they are. But that file has been released. Reporting is optional this year. It'll be required next year. And there'll be webinars, and like I said, Myrna will talk later today or tomorrow? Later in the second set of breakouts this afternoon. Myrna Huffman will be there. So the funding guidelines, and this is only for the credit program. The non-credit program will continue to allocate based on enrollment until we can develop a new formula. So the new funding formula involves 40% of the dollars going out based on your headcount enrollment, credit enrollment, with a base amount to protect the smaller colleges of at least $35,000 per college, or 10% of the total appropriation, whichever is greater. And then 60% of the total appropriation will be distributed based on the numbers of students being served in each of these categories by the colleges. And then the third part of the funding that you will have to spend on this program is the 3-to-1 match that your college provides from other sources to support these activities. I'm going to show you an example of how the formula actually plays out. So if, for example, the program was funded at $100 million, and that's just a hypothetical example because it makes the math as easy as you can get. So 40% of that is $40 million, and if you look at the base of 35,000 or 10%, the 35,000 per college is the amount that would be the base. And then the additional $60 million would be divided. So, okay, so that 40 million per college amounts, no, 40,000. You know, I worked in financial aid for years. It's unbelievable, isn't it? 40,000 per college amounts to $353,000, 982 cents. So essentially $354,000 of the total appropriation would go out based on head count with the protection for small colleges. The remaining funds would be divided up by looking at each college's numbers in each of these categories. So 10% of the $60 million is $6 million. That $6 million would be divided up proportionally based on the number of students who received initial orientation at each college as a percentage of the state total. Is that clear? So in each of these service categories, it's not as hard as it sounds. In each of these, in each of these service categories, we would look at the total number of students who received that service statewide, and then take each college's share of that. And so then that would be totaled up for all of the services, and that total service-based amount plus your base amount would become your allocation. And if you want to talk about that some more, come to the workshop. So we're going to phase this in. This will go into effect for the 2015-16 allocations based on the data that you report next year for 2014-15 enrollments. And the way this works, your MIS data is due the first Monday in August each year. So we don't have your 2014-15 data until the first week of August in 2015. And we have to have that data in order to generate the allocations. So that's why you don't get your allocations until late September or early October, because it relies on the data that you give us. So when we do those 2015-16 allocations, you will have a guarantee of 80% of your prior year allocation for those colleges. I don't know, maybe there are some colleges where there's a real imbalance between the enrollments and the numbers of services being provided. Or maybe there are some colleges that take an extra year or two to get their data in order. Those colleges will be protected at 80% the first year and at 50% the second year. And then beginning in 2017-18, the allocations will just be run every year, and your guarantee will return to what it is now, which is 95% of prior year. The allocations that we actually have for you today are based on the old formula, and the only reason I'm even mentioning it is because it's been quite a few years since we've been able to use the formula, because we've just come through a period of categorical flexibility when the formula was not used at all. So just to remind you, the formula weights new students at a much higher rate than continuing students, but that head count is the driver for each college's share of the total funds available. And the match requirement has always been 3-to-1 for credit matriculation and 1-to-1 for non-credit, which we will be looking at before the end of this year. We will, in the meantime, continue to use the old funding. A lot of us were disappointed that when the credit matriculation funds were augmented in this year's budget, that did not extend to the non-credit. But hopefully when we have the opportunity to look at that and do some work on it, we'll be able to make the case that those funds need to increase as well. If you have interest in serving on a non-credit work group, please let Debbie or me know. And finally, just to mention that in order to facilitate the transition from the old program to the new program, we've kind of made some allowances in the college match so that it gives colleges as much flexibility as possible in how they're able to meet it. And so typically, your matching funds can only be spent for what your program funds can be spent for. That's kind of the whole idea of a match. But in order to provide for the transition, I mean, this is an unusual time when you had a 52% funding cut in the programs, and you've had changes in the programs, and we're trying to rebuild it on a slightly different basis. So, so we recognize that districts responded differently to that cut into how they maintain programs, and so we, you know, we've talked a lot with the CBOs. They've been concerned about this, and so, like I mentioned earlier, there were 8 fundable components to the original program, and now there are 3. So one of the, a couple of areas where the funds were expended previously was on admissions and records and on institutional research. Many of your colleges didn't have a research function until matriculation allowed funds to be spent on it. So what we've said is that although your student success and support program funds can only be spent in the areas of admissions or research to the extent that they're doing direct work to support the student success and support program. That's for direct expenditure of funds, but we will allow you to continue to count match for monies spent in those areas that were previously fundable under matriculation. So just to be really clear, if your assessment approach is transcript evaluation, and if the admissions office is doing that transcript evaluation, there's nothing that prevents you from using student success funds to pay for that function. That's a direct student success and support program function. But that doesn't mean that you would pay for all evaluation or other functions in the admissions office. So that's the end of my exciting part of this presentation. And like I said, if you want more, come to the Q&A session next. And let me turn this over to Dr. Deborah Sheldon to talk about student equity.
Just a slight break. Linda was asking me before I said what announcements had she forgotten to make, and after she started, I suddenly remembered what the announcement was. And that announcement is, many of you were asking after Dr. O'Banion's presentation this morning if there was the PowerPoint was available, and what I wanted to let you know is that his PowerPoint, as well as most of the PowerPoints for the breakout sessions, are all copied onto that flash drive that was included in your packets. And for those of you who are participating in this conference through the webcast, I believe that those PowerPoints are also available on the webcast website. If they're not, they will be shortly. Now I have to add with the caveat that our PowerPoint did not quite make it on the flash drive. But we will have it posted on the website as soon as we get back to the office, so if you're interested. Okay. So, Linda, if you can explain to me how this clicker works.
Just push the forward arrow.
Okay.
Forward.
Which one is forward?
Right.
That one?
On the right.
Right, okay, thanks. Okay, my task is to talk to you about student equity. And as you know, I mean, this is a really essential aspect, especially with some of the figures that Terry O'Banion reminded us of this morning about that our students, like over 70% of them are tested in as not college ready. When I'm just going to address student equity briefly and just go over some of the background of student equity planning in the community college system, many of you are already familiar with that background. We did establish a work group, and we can talk about some of those recommendations. it is still very much a work in progress. So the work group has not finished their work, and we will be continuing that work. Some of the requirements that, at least for the short term, we've instituted, and some resources, some new resources that we have available. Okay, so some of the history of student equity planning in community colleges. The student equity planning was first actually mandated in Title V by the Board of Governors in 2002, and emphasizing the importance of student equity. It actually specifies in Title V what indicators, what type of indicators should be addressed, and which we'll go over in just a few minutes, what groups of students should be looked at, and what factors as far as equity and how that should be addressed. The first requirement and template for a student equity plan was issued in 2002, or actually in 2003. And then that plan and template were updated in 2005. As you know, in 2008 and 9, we were hit with the kind of fiscal crisis and the economic downturn. And many of the requirements associated with student equity, along with several other categorical programs, were subject to categorical flexibility. And so even though the requirement was there, it was kind of robbed of its teeth. Then in 2011, we had the Student Success Task Force. Again, so it didn't make much sense to really look at student equity when we knew that all of the regulations would be changing related to student success. We got SB 1456 passed through the legislature, and so, which, as Linda mentioned earlier, specifically linked the Student and Success and Support Program plan with a student equity plan. And so in 2013, earlier this year, we convened the Student Equity Work Group, which actually, there's several of the work group members who are in this room, and I really want to acknowledge their work and how valuable that input was and still is. And as I said, we have not finished our work and can plan on continuing it. As we started looking in the work group, looking at some of the requirements and comparing the Student Success and Support Program plan requirements with student equity planning, we realized that probably we weren't going to be able to do all of this work all at once. And so the decision was made that we were going to there was a lot of discussion about should we maintain a separate student equity plan, or should we integrate it into other institutional planning efforts, since, you know, student success is the responsibility of the entire institution. And so some of the places the work group recommended integrating student equity were into accreditation, especially the educational master planning, where the college actually develops its budget and how that's going to be spent. The biggest suggestion, and it seemed like there was consensus in the work group that really the best fit for student equity planning was in program review. But they really suggested that we adopt kind of a holistic approach. The problem is that some of the changes that would be required to institute this kind of holistic planning would take some changes to Title V. And so the decision was made that because this was going to be more of a long-term planning effort to really do justice to student equity, we decided to update the current plan, or the old plan, for the short term, and then kind of in an intermediate frame, look at integrating it with the institution-wide planning, and then long-term update Title V. So one thing that we will be doing is linking the due dates and the timeline of the Student Equity Plan with that of the Student Success and Support Program Plan. We'll be handing out a draft of the Student Success and Support Program Plan at our breakout session, and on that you'll see that the due date for that plan is October 17th, 2014, so you've got a whole year. And that deadline for this Student Equity Plan will also be that same date. And it will cover, for this upcoming plan, a 3-year period, but with an initial update, an annual update. Just some of the requirements, when you see a draft of the plan, which will come out probably in the next 2 weeks, you'll see that many of the requirements are the same as the previous plan, with the addition that you'll be required to coordinate with the Student Success and Support Program Plan now. That you do need to have a planning committee that represents the whole institution, with both instruction, student services, academic senate, students, the wide range of stakeholders. We'll ask you to identify, first of all, who your target groups are, to look at a disproportionate impact, and describe at least, activities that you'll be working on to address some of the disparities that you discover. Many of the indicators are still the same. What we have tried to do, the access, course completion, ESL, many of these are very similar to what you'll see on the scorecard. What we've tried to do is recommend existing data sources and indicators that have already been developed either through the Student Success Scorecard or the Basic Skills Tracker, or some of the transfer studies to help you. And when you see the report, we'll actually point out places on the website where you can go to get the data to make it a little easier. I won't go into that. Oops, a little too fast. There we go. I won't go into all of this. We've provided some definitions of disproportionate impact. These groups, gender, ethnicity, age, disability status, are the things that are in Title V that say that you need to look at these groups and how the services that we're providing or not providing are impacting people in these groups. In some of the resources that we will be providing, we will actually give you some suggestions, these are not requirements, for how different methodologies that you could use to measure disproportionate impact. And I also wanted to point out something that is in your packet of materials. We actually asked the research and planning group to develop a guide to measuring disproportionate impact in the delivery of what have been traditionally the matriculation services. So how orientation affects different student groups on your campus, for example, or how the way you're conducting assessment or counseling, how that might affect different groups. And that information is in this report that's in your packet. We were actually very pleased with the way it was done. It was done actually by one of our speakers for tomorrow's general session, Roger Purnell and Darla Cooper. And with that, there's another list of resources. I am going to turn the mic and the clicker over to Bonnie Edwards, who's going to talk to you a little bit about Common Assessment and several of the requests for proposals that are out.
Thank you. Okay, I've never liked podiums, and you can probably figure out why. I guess this technically makes me an official talking head for many of you out there. So, all right, no, I'm good. Let them laugh. Okay, so, all right, but no, all jokes aside, this is technology, so no laughing. It's not a laughing matter. So let me just click on here. There it goes. So there's 3 grants, requests for applications, that have come out of the Chancellor's office, and some of you might have had a chance to look them over. If you are interested in finding out more information, they are posted on the website of the Chancellor's office under the technology webpage under What's New. So if you look at the context of the grants, you'll see that 2 are directly related to the topics that came out of the Student Success Task Force work, Common Assessment, as well as the Ed Planning. Online education was a governor's initiative that he wanted to have implemented at the community colleges. And if you think about online education, you can probably come to the conclusion very quickly that there's going to be a heavy student services component, because we've got to provide our online students with the same support structures and services to help them be successful as we want to provide to our on-campus students. So that is really the context of the grants, is the online education, Common Assessment, which we've been trying to get for quite a while, and then the education planning. So the next slide here. All 3 of these requests for applications, and just to clarify what a request for application is, if you're not familiar, is this is Prop 98 money, and it needs to be sent down to a district to be the fiscal agent and to be the project monitor, or excuse me, the project director and implementation lead for the various projects. And also to put a little bit of context into the Technology and Telecommunications Division of the Chancellor's Office, there are some projects that you might be familiar with that actually run out of my shop, such as CCC Apply, or eTranscript California, or the CCC Confer. So all those are technology monitored projects. And the Chancellor's Office is trying to also practice a little bit of what it preaches, and we've really formed a partnership at the Chancellor's Office between the technology shop, Student Services, and our Academic Affairs Division. So for Student Services, technology is partnering to achieve the Common Assessment Initiative as well as the education planning. And for the online education, we are partnering with our Academic Affairs. So we're really trying to bring our common strengths to the table and let Student Services do what they do best, and let technology do what we do best, and really come together to leverage our skills. So the Online Education Initiative, to give you a little overview of what it's trying to achieve and how we anticipate it rolling out, it's going to be governed by a consortium agreements. What this means is we need to have all the colleges come together and agree to participate in this online initiative in a common way, meaning we have any policies in place that are negatively impacting, say, the workflow, the student experience, the faculty experience. How do we need to come to agreement to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row and we agree to operate on the same platform from a business perspective as well as technology? So the initial focus for these consortium agreements will be kind of our low-hanging fruit that has already been tackled by the community colleges, such as the advanced transfer degrees and other degree applicable courses where a lot of this articulation work has already started forming and has been completed and implemented. The other focus of the Online Education Initiative is really to streamline the experience. We want to make sure that a student can find courses that they're looking at. One of the directives, or one of the goals of this initiative, was to make sure that we could get as many students into the courses that they needed in order to complete their goals, such as transfer or certificate completion. So they need to be able to find these courses. If they're at college A and that course is full, they need to easily be able to find another course in the online system that also applies to their degree and their goal. Registration and enrollment, they need to easily be able to enroll in these courses. And a common course management system is one of the ways we hope to also develop a common look and feel and a streamlined process for our students. When you think about a student, we don't want them to have to relearn the technology each time they go in and take a course. It's hard enough just to learn the course content, but you want to have them take a course to take the course. So the idea is to get them a common platform so as they move from one online course to another, they are already familiarized with that experience. And then student services, this is where you'll come to play. We've got assessment, proctoring, tutoring, planning, advising, articulation, all of those elements that come into streamlining this experience, going again back to those consortium agreements and really making sure that we have thought this through. Professional development is another piece that we really wanted to focus on in the online experience. We want to make sure that all the courses that are offered through this consortium are of high quality, that they practice good pedagogy, that they really are engaging for the students, and also that our faculty are experienced and have got the proper training in order to teach in an online environment. It's very different from teaching online than it is in the classroom, and we want to make sure that all faculty are prepared and have the opportunity to prepare. So let's see, the address, also we asked that if the applicant could address perhaps how basic skills and credit by exam might be supported through this process. Next step after we award, get together some advisory committees. Oh, 3 minutes, I gotta hurry. Okay, we're gonna get together some committees, we're gonna talk, we're gonna get a CMS, we are gonna, and you're not gonna be required to do it. Okay, I'm moving on. I should speed up. Okay, common assessment initiatives. So what this is looking at is coming together and selecting an English, math, and an ESL test that can be used by all the community colleges. It'll be the same test, and it would be done in collaboration with everyone as best we possibly can. So to get input from around the state to develop the test and to implement it on a common delivery and administrative platform so that we would have a background reporting system that met your needs. We'd collect requirements from the field and translate those requirements into this system. Another piece of common assessment is the data warehouse. So we want to collect this test information in a common spot, but we also want to address the emerging needs of dealing with multiple measures. We want to not only collect multiple measures, but do research and validation and try to provide information out to the colleges on what multiple measures have good research behind them. So we hope that it becomes actually not just an assessment system for you, but actually a tool to help you improve the placement process at your college. That's really what we want to do, not just assess our students, but really to improve the whole placement process. And we want to do this through expanded research and collaboration with you and also with our K-12 partners so that we can create this dialogue of, hey, this is where your students are placing. Let's talk about aligning curriculum, aligning tests. So we want to really expand that conversation, and CalPass Plus is going to be addressing that particular piece of this. All right, I probably have 1 minute left. Okay, so more advisory committees, requests for proposals, and test selection. Okay, all right, education planning. So support for all colleges. So the idea is that if you already have an education planning system in place, that hopefully this system could provide you some benefit. If you do not have an existing system in place, again, operating on the design that we could help those colleges as well. The way we anticipate helping particularly those colleges that would have a system already in place would be providing a system of data that you don't currently have access to, such as a lot of community college articulation. So try to remove some of that work that you do articulating all of these courses and make this data more accessible to you. Increase the utilization and the implementation of electronic transcripts. Improve access to program inventory, and if we need to improve this program, how could we do that to help you? And expand the CID program. And then obviously this would offer a ed planning and degree audit tool as part of the package. And then a student portal dealing with streamlining steps. As Mr. Benny was talking about earlier, we don't want to have a student go to here, to here, to here. We want to try to put our arms around them and give them a streamlined process that they would follow so that they easily know their next steps in the education planning. So be from exploring to all the way to defining what their actual course taking patterns would be. So once again, the discovery work involved in that. So to conclude quickly, we have overarching themes. We really want to focus on collaboration. Just as we're doing at the Chancellor's office and bringing together technology and academic affairs and student services, we want to make sure that we have a very collaborative environment and integration. We have a lot of systems that are out there that are being developed on a statewide level. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to leverage the tools and services that are offered and then expand upon those so that we have a very integrated system of data that's reachable by other systems rather as we go down the pipe into 5 years down the road. We need to have data accessible. We need to have security. We've got a lot of potential to have security breaches out there. We want to make sure that we're doing this smart and we have security at the forefront of our mind. And then evaluation. As was mentioned earlier, it's great to put tools and processes and programs into place. When I say programs, I mean technology programs, but are they working? Are they doing what you need them to do? So evaluation is going to be a heavy piece of this. And then customer engagement. You are the customer. And one of the tenets of good systems development is that we listen to you and we incorporate your requirements into these systems. Will everyone be happy and running, writing home to mom rule, about everything? Probably not. But we'll do our best to try to make sure that we hit, the crux of your needs and do some of that heavy lifting so that you can really meet with your students and spend the time on valuable activities. Okay, I probably exceeded that. Sorry.
All right. Hi, I'm Melissa Connor. I'm from the Foundation for California Community Colleges, and many of you know that we're the official nonprofit auxiliary supporting the Chancellor's office and the whole California Community College system. And last year we announced as our official flagship fundraising initiative, the Student Success Initiative, and we were looking for philanthropic dollars that could come in and help with student success implementation. And the project that I'm going to talk about today is kind of a result of that effort. This is a partnership from the Kresge Foundation. And this is a project called the Priorities Project, and the foundation is working on this in close collaboration with the Chancellor's office, especially student services, technology, and the communications divisions. And we are working on a student awareness campaign around sort of the new rules around priority enrollment. And even bigger than that, we're working on a campaign that would help students sort of get on track at the beginning and stay on track to complete their educational goals. The campaign will promote the 3 priority actions that we talked about earlier to help students achieve and maintain priority enrollment, which is assessment, orientation, and education planning. And so we'll be informing students that these are required, but we'll also be kind of encouraging them to take these efforts seriously and realize that this has an impact on them and can help them get to where they want to go. So what we're showing you today is a very early direction. We just wanted to take advantage of the summit to really get your feedback on not only just sort of the design direction, but really what kind of resources you think would be useful to students, what kind of messages you think would resonate. So as Linda mentioned, we do have a table here, and I'm going to run through these materials quickly, but we'd love to spend a little more time walking you through the materials, and we actually have a survey that you can fill out to give us some feedback. But this is our proposed logo. The campaign is called Step Forward, and it's centered around the idea that students, yes, they have to take these steps, right, to get where they want to go. But it's not just, they're not just doing these mundane steps, that they're also moving forward in their educational goals and in their lives. And then our tagline, Achieve Your Priority, again, plays on the recognition of enrollment priority, but that it's not just about that, it's bigger than that. It's about finding their own priorities and getting there. So the campaign will have traditional collateral material. There will be a poster campaign. But the exciting part, I think, of the campaign is a data-driven website. And this website will be an ongoing resource for students. And it will actually be integrated in with CCC Apply. So for a student that has just gone through CC Applied and completed the registration process, they will immediately have access to this information. And some key data will actually be transferring over with the student. So name, college, course of study, and then we can tailor some of the information that they'll be receiving based on that. There will also be a public version of the site for colleges who don't use CCC Apply, and even for high school counselors, if they wanted to go ahead and let students know, what to expect when they're going to community college. This is a sample screen, so you can imagine a student has just completed their application at CCC Apply, and then they would get a pop-up window that says something like, "Great, Jordan, you completed your application and you're on your way. Let us help you get there. Step forward." And then this is a sample of kind of the top half of the landing page for the Step Forward site. And we would have a series of rotating images. These can be kind of customized based on kind of the area the student's interested in. We'll have a video on, what does priority enrollment mean, but more importantly, what are the actions you need to take to get you where you want to go. And then as you scroll down through the site, we'll have a section on assessment, and a section on orientation, and a section on ed planning, which just gives the students a sense of what are these things, and get them used to the terminology. We'll provide some system-wide resources, and we will be able to provide some custom resources based on, for example, the college they selected. And then this website will, of course, drive them directly to the college website as well. So if you would like to stop by and learn more about the campaign and give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it. And in appreciation, we do have an iPad mini that we're giving out. So just a little incentive to take the time to help us. The survey takes probably 5 to 10 minutes, so we'd really appreciate that. You can expect we'll probably be doing some beta testing for spring 2014. In terms of some early materials and probably the public-facing website. And then you can expect full rollout of all these resources by fall semester 2014. Oh, yes. And just to clarify, we have one iPad mini.
Okay, thank you to all of the presenters. We have 15 minutes for questions that you can address to any of us, but the Foundation's table is right there where Amy Subinger is waving. And this is a great chance for me to point out that there may be somebody who's familiar to you standing behind that table, Ms. Lucha Ortega. Retired last year from Shasta College as Vice President for Student Services, and she's been doing some work consulting with us on student equity planning as well as with the Foundation on this project. So, hi, Lucha. Okay. So, are there questions? Yes. Oh, yes, please go to the mics because you want our broadcast public out there to hear.
Earlier in the presentation, when you were speaking about the abbreviated and comprehensive ed plan, in terms of funding, how's that going to work? Will we be funded differently depending on what ed plan?
Yes. The abbreviated ed plan can be done once for a student in their total enrollment at the college. And it is funded at 10%. And then the comprehensive ed plan can be done once for a student, and that's funded at 35%. And if a student needs to meet with a counselor or do something to make adjustment to the comprehensive plan, then you would count that as other follow-up services, and that would be funded at 5%.
Hi, Linda. I'm
Hi.
Leticia from LA Trade Tech College. So my question is, you mentioned earlier that you're not going to be very prescriptive about how colleges actually implement some of these strategies. And so help me understand on the orientation piece, if colleges want to have an instructional component to the orientation, is there anything that bars being able to reach that benchmark and also have an instructional component to that?
That's a good question. And that's a bit of a, when you say instructional component, it becomes a tiny bit tricky, because if you're being funded to do something through the apportionment, then you wouldn't necessarily get categorical funding to do the same thing. On the other hand, the principle is you're being funded for what's accomplished. So if each of those students comes out of the course as having completed initial orientation, then it will have fulfilled the the intent of the program. So it's tricky. I'm looking at Wim as one of the people who was on the task force that talked about all of this, and so we struggled with some of these issues. We'll get you more guidance on that.
Well, earlier this morning, we heard the whole notion of being able to integrate the instructional experience with the student services experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to understand what the State Chancellor's Office vision is of actually making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean from a big picture sense.
Uh-huh. Right. I mean, there's absolutely, I'm actually a big fan of student success courses, and that's a form of orientation. So it's not at all, excuse me, something that we would want to discourage. The only issue is when it comes to funding, we can't double fund everything that's done, or there won't be enough funds to support the function throughout the institution. So if you're not using your student success funds to support orientation because it's being taken care of in another way, it means that you would have more money available to invest in other services that are funded through the program.
Hi, Linda. It's Regina. How you doing?
Hi, Regina.
I have a question for you. Is student success funding tied to the student or tied to the location? For example, if we have a student that takes an orientation at El Camino College and that student enrolls in courses at the Compton Center, how would that work?
Compton gets its own allocation. Yeah. Come to the next session when we can when we can talk this through. I mean, okay, so you're going to have students who are attending. I mean, that's sort of Compton gets its own categorical funding, even though it's not technically a college anymore. So so people understand that's part of the question. But so that's essentially the same circumstance as two colleges in a multi-campus district. And what do we say about that? There's a mic.
I mean, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you remember the presentation on the funding formula, there's actually two pieces to the funding formula. 40% is head count and 60% is services. So I would think that if a student was, it's like a similar situation when you have one student who's attending two different colleges at the same time. It's conceivable that a student could go through orientation in both places, and both colleges could count that orientation. It's just that they can only go through the orientation one time at each college. Does that answer? No, that doesn't help. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Come to the next session, Regina. We'll talk it through a little more.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Is there someone else?
Okay.
Okay, Linda, I have one more question. This is not a hard question, I don't think. This is a pre-enrollment services question. If we're out in the high schools and we have a student that applies to El Camino College, they go through their assessment, they do their orientation, but then they decide not to attend or take courses at El Camino College, do we still get the credit?
If they have registered, if they have enrolled, if they've done if you have a basic record for the student, yes. Okay.
Hi, Linda. My name's Lee from Santa Rosa College. I have two questions. The first question for my VP. He's asking me to ask you.
Wait, where is he?
Since the SSSP funding has been augmented for this current year, 2013-14, but the district has not heard any words about when the fund will arrive at the district, so we're kind of anxious to see when the funding will be arriving.
We have the allocations to give you today.
All right. Thank you. And the second question.
I mean, you know, the funds go out through the regular apportionment process, so you've already received a big chunk of it in the advance, and you'll get more in P1 and P2. But what he really wants to know is when will you know your allocation, so you know how much to expect.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
And the second question from faculty, they want to do some tweaks on the assessment tools we're using, but also they're aware the common assessments come in. They want to see when the timeline is going to be, so they don't put in unnecessary efforts.
I'm looking at Bonnie, but I would think that there would not be a common assessment available for use before 15, 16? 16, 17? But it would probably be tested in 2015, 16, and then available statewide in 2016, 17.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, Linda.
Regina again.
I'm sorry. Someone asked me to ask for clarification, so I want to be clear. If we're out in the high schools and we have a student that applies to El Camino College, they go through the assessment process, and we offer them a great orientation, and they decide not to attend, they do not enroll in any courses, but they applied. But they did not enroll in any courses, we're still eligible for funding.
If you have a student basic record for the student, meaning they applied to the college and were entered into your system, then yes, you can count it. Hello,
Hey,
Dennis.
Part of the enrollment priorities process, the BOG fee waiver is supposed to be a loss of BOG fee waiver for enrollment priorities, and I know that you delayed it. When are you thinking about starting that process? 2015, is that right?
You know, I have not been able to think about anything other than this event for the last couple of weeks. So if you could ask me that question on like Wednesday. Oh, no, I might take off Wednesday. So ask me that question next Monday, and that's one of the next things that we're going to focus on in a big way. We drafted the BOG fee waiver regulations. We intended to go for first reading to the Board of Governors this month and then finalize them in November. For a series of reasons, there was, you know, a lot of continued recommendations for amendments and concerns about the potential impact of the regulations on disadvantaged populations. We pulled them back to have some more discussion with people, and I now think that they're likely to go for first reading in November, which means they won't go for adoption until January, and I believe we may have to push back the effective date because we need to give students and colleges plenty of notice before that goes into effect. So, and I mean, I'm really stepping out here because I've not had an opportunity to discuss it with anyone, most importantly the Chancellor, since the board meeting. But I think my recommendation is likely to be that we delay it a year because it's not something that you can do. You don't want to pull the rug out from under students. Hi.
This might be a little bit too down in the weeds, and so if you want to say wait till the later session, I'm good with that.
Okay.
But when I read through the definitions in the handout and screen about the elements will be required to assess in our planning, transfer, basic skills completion, et cetera, they didn't read just like the data mart or scorecard numbers. So are we meant to be able to use the actual scorecard numbers, or are we going to develop something that's generally similar?
You're asking specifically about student equity, right? Not
Right.
about the student success and
yes.
support. Yeah.
Yeah.
On each one of the access, or each one of the indicators, we're suggesting using a different indicator. Some of them are pulled or suggested directly from the student scorecard, but others are not. But they're on the data mart and other, like the basic skills tractor, depending on what each one of those are. And in the descriptions that will come out in the student equity planning template, it will give you those precise measures. I don't have a copy of the draft plan in front of me, but
Okay.
yeah.
And the reason I ask now is if are those measures, although they're part of the student equity planning, since that's to be integrated with the student success and support services program plan, are those measures or other measures like them expected to be in the program plan?
In the student success program plan,
We don't have anything like that in the draft plan at this point.
we do ask how you're going to integrate your student success planning with your student equity planning. And I mean, to me, I almost hate talking about them separately. As far as I'm concerned, student success is about student equity and vice versa. So, you know, the fact that the scorecard is going to break out success based on student factors that we need to know in order to, you know, improve student equity is such a tremendous advance that we did not have at the time we first started about student equity planning. So, you know, we're going to have a much richer focus on it, as well as you know, opportunities to look at data in different ways. So our goal is to have as much integration as possible, but we kind of felt that we could not turn the entire student equity planning and reporting world upside down this year while we're just putting the student success pieces in place. But I think that, you know, but that's the intent, is to marry them over time.
Thank you.
We have time for probably just one more question, maybe. See how long it takes.
It's a very quick one. Sergio Klander, Victor Valley College. In your allocation, you have 2.4.
Can you speak more into the mic? I'm having trouble hearing you.
In your allocation, you have 2.4 factor for new credit students and 1 point factor for continuing. Where do returning students fall?
Returning students fall wherever you can work them in. We're not requiring it because we recognize that resources are not unlimited. And are you talking about in the funding formula?
The funding factor, yes.
Okay. So in the current funding formula, not the new one. Yeah. Okay. So you are credited for every continuing student, and you are credited at 2.4 times every new student. So a continuing student is counted as 1. A new student is counted as 2.4.
And students that are returning are funded at 1 or 2.4. That's
a new student is new to your college.
okay. So they are continuing.
Okay. Thank you. So a returning student has attended your college before. an admissions expert is saying, are we talking about somebody who's classified as continuing? And I'd have to be looking at the data to answer that question. Okay. So, all right, so just a couple of other quick announcements. Well, one. Okay. So you have a 15-minute break before the first breakout sessions, and but hang on, folks. Why? I wanted to mention something to everybody. Okay, there is not a breakout session on something that I wanted everybody to be aware of because we didn't get it in. But the faculty at Cabrillo College have been working on a faculty toolkit. I provided a copy in all of your packets, and it's also on the flash drive if you want to share it with others on your campus. When I saw this, I was just so heartened, because this is, someone asked the question earlier, what do we mean by collaboration between student services and instruction? This was a really thoughtful look at how can faculty in the classroom and through institutional processes support student success. And there are so many things that our instructional faculty, so many opportunities that they have on a daily basis. They interact with the students much more than student services does to support and encourage their students. So I hope everybody will take a look at this. It's a really valuable piece, and I'm sure that those listed in here as the authors would just love to talk to you about it, right? Right.